There are a number of graphing processes in Hilltop Hydro, and we're going to have a look at the graph over time process. It's similar to the time series graph in Manager, but you have much more control over the graphs produced in Hydro. We talked about data selection, choosing how the data is drawn, applying time filters, determining the range and scale of the graph, applying labels to the graph, and drawing overplots, and changing the colors of a graph, and how to tell Hydro what you want it to do. And here we're going to look at making changes to graphs after you've drawn them without having to run the process again. First we'll draw a graph. So I select my data, select my time range. Everything else is how I want it. Click OK. Now I'll overplot a second set of data. Graph over time, select my data. The other settings remain unchanged. Plot, overplot on the same axis. OK. Let's do a third set for good measure. Choose my data. Everything else stays the same, so we can click OK. Well, I've got the 3 traces I asked for, but it's a bit of a mess to be fair, and I'm really only interested in the most recent data, so let's lose the earlier stuff. So I move the cursor to the horizontal axis and left click when the pointer changes to a hand. Here I can change the time range. That's better, but as the scale of the graph was determined by the plot I first drew, it looks like there's some data that's been chopped off here. To fix this, I go to the vertical axis, left click, and I can change the range. Let's double it. And while we're at it, let's make the minimum 0. This is flow data after all. My graph is labelled with the site name of the first set of data, but I'd like to change that to reflect all sets. So I move the cursor to the label, the pointer changes to a capital A, I left click, and here I can enter my new label. I'm typing in the text, but you could change the parameter here too. I want it to stand out a bit, so I click the ellipsis button and I can change its appearance here. Similarly, I could change the top right label and the axis labels in this way. Now we're getting somewhere. We could also separate these traces out to get a different perspective. We click on the trace label, go to the trace tab. The trace we're looking at is currently drawn on the left axis, but we can change it to new underplot. Let's do the same with our other overplot. And now our traces are drawn immediately underneath each other using the same horizontal axis. Right, I'm going to put them back together super fast with the wonders of modern technology and have a look at what else we can do in the Trace tab. We could plot this trace on the right hand axis, and I'll just go back, we could remove it altogether. That's what we can do under the Trace tab, and let's have a look at what else is available in the Trace dialog. We have the Options tab, just the same as in the monster dialog that we used to draw our graph in the first place, so we could change the way Hydro draws the data here. We can access the time filter, and we have the Color tab, where we can change the color of the trace, the thickness of the line, and the style of the line. We can change the style of the markers here too. We've only got lines on our graph, but you'd see markers on a scatter plot, for example. You can also change the color sequence for overplots here. Let's have a look now at what else we can do by clicking on the axes, and we'll start with the vertical axis. I can change the scale here and control the vertical axis label. We can access the Colors tab here, and let's make a couple of changes. Now we'll go to the horizontal axis where we changed the time range earlier. We can access the Colors tab from here too, and let's go there without delay and change those colors back to something more palatable. Now let's go to the Axis Range tab. We've got our data on a single axis, but we can change it to a multi-axis here. If we select 1 year, Hydro will split our 2 years of data into 2 graphs, each of 1 year, and we could use this to look for annual trends. Let's go back to that dialog again, and here we can move or remove the trace labels. You can see that you have full control of the graphs you draw in Hydro and can customize them to your heart's content without having to redraw the graphs.